He looked right at me. Not like he saw me. Not really. But like I didn't matter. Like I was just another stranger waiting for my latte. He stirred his coffee twice, slowly, deliberately, while she reached across the table and touched his wrist. I had seen that move before. She used to do it to me when I said something clever, or when she wanted to pretend I had. It was a signature merrily move, soft, calculated, practiced. There was a time when that touch made me feel like I was winning. Now, it made me feel like vomiting. I didn't go to the cafe looking for her. I didn't even know she liked this place. We'd never been there together, probably on purpose. I was only there because the tire shop down the street told me it'd be a 2-hour wait, and I needed Wi-Fi and caffeine to survive the boredom. But instead of killing time, I ended up watching my wife flirt with a man in a navy blue sweater who had the kind of jawline you only get from never eating anything joyful. She was smiling so hard it made her cheekbones sharpen. She leaned in like he was telling her state secrets. And then, God help me, she laughed. Not the polite, "Oh, you're so silly," laugh she gives to my coworkers at dinner parties. This was that buried deep, 2009-era real laugh. The one I hadn't heard in almost a year. I stood behind a ficus for 7 minutes and 13 seconds. I counted, because I'm the kind of guy who counts things when he's nervous. I counted how many times she flipped her hair, 4, how many times she checked her phone, 0, and how many sips he took from her cup, 2, and no one even flinched. That told me everything. So I did what any emotionally shredded man in cargo shorts and betrayal would do. I walked to the napkin stand. I grabbed a pen from the share jar. I wrote 4 words and walked straight to her table. I didn't wait for them to notice me. I didn't speak. I slid the napkin next to her pastry, turned around, and walked out the door as my knees went to water. The note said, "Don't come home." And here's the twist. She didn't. But what she did instead was so much worse than I ever imagined. By the time I got back to the house, the sky had gone from blue to that ugly, bruised gray that looks like it forgot how to be day or night. I didn't turn the lights on. Just stood in the living room, holding my car keys like they were going to answer something for me. Her car wasn't in the driveway. I didn't expect it to be, but I still checked out the window 7 times in the first hour like some desperate dog waiting for its owner. My phone had exploded while I was driving. I didn't look at the texts. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I couldn't. It felt like if I heard her voice, it would make everything real. There's this thing that happens when you're betrayed, and I don't think anyone talks about it enough. You start inventorying your own stupidity. Like, I stood in the kitchen and stared at the coffee mugs we bought in Charleston and thought, how many mornings did she pour coffee into that while already thinking of someone else? Every object becomes evidence in a trial where you're both the victim and the idiot on the stand. Around 9 p.m., the doorbell rang. I froze. My heart started hammering so hard I could hear it echo through my teeth. I didn't move at first. I wanted to believe it was her. Part of me, the broken part, still hoped she was outside, mascara smudged, maybe holding that stupid napkin, ready to explain it all away with some absurd but magical excuse. But it wasn't her. It was him, the man from the cafe, standing on my porch, holding a grocery bag like he was delivering soup to his sick neighbor. He looked around casually, like he didn't just nuke my marriage 6 hours ago. I opened the door halfway, no words, just staring. He smiled. "Hey, you're Lyle, right?" he said, like we were old friends meeting at a backyard barbecue. I didn't answer. I didn't blink. I just stood there, every part of me tense enough to snap. He held up the bag like it was a peace offering. "She told me not to talk to you, but I just thought you should have these." Inside were 3 items: her spare house keys, a little brown envelope, and a single AirPod case. Before I could say anything, he turned and walked away. No explanation. No apology. Just gone. I shut the door with hands I didn't realize were shaking until the keys jingled against the lock. I placed the bag on the kitchen island and just stared at it. For what felt like an hour. I didn't open it. Not yet. I couldn't. Instead, I poured myself a drink I hadn't touched in months. The scotch I kept hidden in the cabinet above the fridge, the in case of apocalypse bottle. Turns out, infidelity counts as one. Eventually, I picked up the envelope. Inside was a note. Not handwritten, no personal touch. Just a typed message on plain printer paper, like a company memo. "Lyle, I need space. You saw something out of context, and I'm sorry for that. Please don't make this uglier than it has to be. I'll collect the rest of my things next week." No explanation. No remorse. No I love you. No I made a mistake. Just logistics. And here's the part that made my stomach turn to ice. It was dated the day before I saw her at the cafe. She knew I'd find out. She planned for it. Pre-typed her goodbye like it was a resignation letter from some job she hated. Like I was just a desk she was tired of sitting at. And I still hadn't gotten to the worst part. That AirPod case, it wasn't hers. It was mine. Except I hadn't used mine in weeks. I opened it and saw only one earbud inside. When I played it, I heard them. Her voice. His laugh. And then something I will never unhear. I hesitated before pressing play. There was this stupid, delusional part of me that wanted to believe maybe it was just a pocket recording, maybe a random accident. Nothing intentional. But the second I heard her voice, clear and unbothered, I knew this wasn't an accident. It was a breadcrumb. A breadcrumb I wasn't supposed to find. Or maybe I was. Her voice came through first, calm and almost rehearsed. He still thinks I'm planning the fundraiser this weekend, she said, followed by a pause, then a soft laugh. The man, him, replied, do you think he'll show up to it? And they both laughed this slow, knowing laugh that didn't belong to two people worried about hurting someone. It was the kind of laugh you hear in interrogation rooms from people who believe they've already gotten away with it. Then silence. Then, her voice again, lower this time, with that dark, twisted mix of amusement and contempt that made my chest ache. He's not stupid, she said. He's just loyal. And loyalty can be manipulated if you keep the illusion alive long enough. That sentence hit harder than any slap, any scream, any confession. It was dissecting me like a lab rat, and she was doing it for sport. He responded with something I didn't catch. It was muffled. Maybe he leaned away, but she answered clearly. It's almost over. One more week, and I'm done pretending. There was a beat of silence, and then the recording cut. I didn't move for a long time after that. The world felt oddly quiet. Even the hum of the fridge felt too loud, too artificial. I played it again, not because I needed to hear it, but because I needed to confirm this nightmare wasn't something my brain stitched together out of paranoia. The second time, it hit worse. Because now I caught all the smaller things, her tone, the way she said loyal, like it was a weakness, a flaw, something pathetic. I sat there trying to piece it together. Why one more week? Why the note? Why hand-deliver the AirPod with the recording? Was it arrogance? Pity? Or was this a message, a warning? The kind someone leaves behind when they've already moved on to phase 2 of whatever plan they think they're entitled to. I poured another drink and tried to think rationally. But there's no way to be rational when the person you shared a bed with for 8 years is secretly documenting their betrayal like it's a podcast episode. I couldn't stop picturing her face, how casually she leaned in toward him at the cafe, how she wiped her finger along the rim of her cup like she had nowhere else to be, no one else to answer to. And then something even worse occurred to me. This wasn't just about cheating. This had the markings of something more calculated, cold, possibly even strategic. She didn't just fall into someone else's arms. She prepped for it. She left clues, arranged timings, sent a man to my front door who knew my name, and then left me with a piece of evidence that could only mean one thing. She was 2 steps ahead. Always had been. The next morning, the power went out in just one half of the house, my office. I went to flip the breaker and noticed that one of the labels had been peeled off. The one marked Router Plus Office. A minor detail, right? But it felt planted. Like something was being tampered with. Or erased. I restarted my laptop and checked my email, only to find that I had been locked out of 3 shared accounts. Personal ones. Ones we only used for taxes and travel. That was when I started noticing other things. My backup drive was missing. The calendar she used to sync work and home events was wiped clean. Not just the future events, all of them. As if she'd never existed in our shared digital life at all. You know that moment in a heist movie where the thief escapes and the alarms finally start blaring too late? That was me, standing in my own house, surrounded by her handwriting on old birthday cards, photos of us still on the walls, and yet everything digital, everything connected to now, was vanishing. Whatever was happening, it had started long before the cafe. And I had just opened the first door to a house of secrets I never knew existed. I didn't sleep that night. I tried. God knows I tried. But every time I closed my eyes, I'd hear her voice from that recording, dissecting my loyalty like it was some kind of disease. Around 4:30 in the morning, I gave up pretending to rest and got up. The house was so quiet it felt unnatural, like the kind of silence you get in an abandoned theater. Something used to live here, but now it was just echoes. I sat at the kitchen table, no coffee, no phone, just my own thoughts clawing at the walls of my brain. I kept thinking about the power outage, the missing files, the wiped calendar. These weren't coincidences. This was coordinated. She didn't just leave me. She'd been erasing me. And what made it worse was that she was good at it. Too good. Almost like she had practice. That's when I started looking through the house. Not just the drawers or the shared closets. I mean deep searching. Behind paintings, under the floorboards in the garage, the crawl space beneath the stairs. I knew how it sounded. I didn't care. Paranoia wasn't paranoia anymore. It was self-preservation. Around 9 a.m., I opened the small vent in the wall behind our laundry machines. It was one of those spots you never think about unless you're fixing something or hiding something. I removed the cover, reached in, and felt a box. A smooth, black metal box, cold to the touch, like it hadn't been held in years. It was about the size of a shoebox, but heavier, dense, like it was filled with something that didn't want to be found. I took it out, set it on the floor, and opened it slowly. Inside was a stack of old photos, a USB stick, a burner phone still wrapped in plastic, and a small leather-bound notebook with no name on the cover. My first reaction was confusion, then fear. The photos weren't of us. They weren't even of people I knew. They were surveillance shots. Different people, different places, hotel lobbies, restaurants, driveways. Each had a date written on the back in Marilee's handwriting. Some went back years. 2 of them were time-stamped before we even met. I sat on the floor for what must have been 20 minutes just trying to process it. I felt like I had broken into a stranger's life. Like this wasn't my wife. This was someone else entirely. I opened the notebook, careful not to smudge the ink. Each page was like a log. First names, addresses, license plate numbers, strange shorthand phrases like R, 210 loyalty, and J, slipped again, clean break soon. Page after page of what looked like psychological profiles or targets. My hands were sweating, my heart racing like I'd just robbed a bank. I wasn't just dealing with a cheater. I was dealing with someone who had a system, a methodology, the kind of planning you don't use unless you've done this before. That's when it hit me. Maybe I wasn't the first. Maybe I was just the latest. One in a long line of disposable characters in her curated life. I plugged the USB into my laptop with shaking fingers. I knew I shouldn't. Every instinct screamed this was bigger than me, but I couldn't stop myself. The folder that opened had 2 files. One labeled contracts, the other exit_audio_5. I opened the contracts file first, and what I saw made my skin crawl. They weren't legal contracts. They were lists. Lists of men. Full names, dates, short psychological breakdowns, notes like gift-oriented, resentment toward father, likely to stay after first infraction. Under each name was a timeline. How long she had been with them. When she started pulling away. When she planned to exit. My name was on the 3rd page, next to the word loyalist. I didn't even know what that meant yet, but I knew I didn't want to see the second file. And yet, I clicked it. The audio was less than 90 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. It wasn't recorded in the cafe. It was older. She was speaking to someone I didn't recognize. Male, calm voice, maybe mid-30s. She said, "The key is to keep them emotionally invested even when you're pulling back. You give them just enough hope to stay, and by the time they figure out what's happening, they're too embarrassed to fight it." Then she laughed. That same laugh from the cafe. Cold. Sharp. Weaponized. The man asked, "What if they don't let go?" Her response? "They always do. Or they break themselves trying not to." The file ended. And that's when I realized. She wasn't running from me. She wasn't afraid. She was executing the endgame of something she had already finished in her mind. I was just catching up to the crime scene long after the crime had been perfected. And something told me, this wasn't over. I stayed on the kitchen floor until the light started bleeding through the blinds like thin gold wires. The sun came up like nothing had happened, like the universe didn't care that I'd just cracked open the secret archive of the person I thought I knew best. There's something nauseating about sunlight when your entire perception of reality has collapsed. It makes you feel like you're out of sync with the world, like everyone else is still asleep in their bubbles while you're sitting on a landmine. The black box was still open in front of me. I went through the photos again, slower this time, trying to make sense of who these people were. I didn't recognize a single face. But on the back of the third photo, I found something new, a single name written beneath the date. Ellis Danton. I froze. That name meant absolutely nothing to me. But it felt important. The handwriting was different, less sharp, more hesitant, like she was nervous when she wrote it. I flipped through more photos. For others had the same name. Sometimes in the corner, sometimes beneath a scribbled phrase like too soon or switch aborted. Every time I saw that name, my pulse quickened. I had to know who he was. I grabbed my laptop, hands still trembling from the night before, and started digging. No social media hits. No LinkedIn. Nothing in the usual places. But then I found something buried in an old community newspaper archive from a town about 2 hours north of here. Local man reported missing in 2017. Ellis Danton, 32, last seen leaving the Violet Lantern Bar after work event. There was no follow-up. No body found. No resolution. Just vanished. I stared at the article for so long the screen dimmed. Missing since 2017. Marilee and I started dating in 2018. The dates overlapped like badly patched drywall. That wasn't a coincidence. I opened the notebook again and flipped to the final pages, looking for any mention of Ellis. Near the back was a short entry. ED, pushed too far. Changed tactics. Terminated phase early. Cover intact. Move forward, new city. No loose threads. It didn't read like grief. It read like an executive decision. Terminated phase early. What the hell does that even mean? The words echoed in my skull like a gunshot in a warehouse. I started to feel sick. Like actually physically sick. Was this just manipulation? Or was it something worse? My phone buzzed. The first message I'd received in almost a day. It was from an unknown number. No name. No emoji. Just this. You should stop digging. Some people don't stay missing forever. I didn't breathe for at least 30 seconds. I sat frozen in the kitchen chair, rereading that message over and over. There was no typo. No explanation. Just a warning wrapped in implication. I looked at the security camera feed from my phone. We had 3 cameras around the house. I'd installed them myself 2 years ago when someone broke into a neighbor's car down the street. I always thought I was being paranoid. Now I felt like I hadn't gone far enough. Camera 1, the driveway, was normal. Camera 2, backyard, nothing but a swaying bird feeder. Camera 3, which faced the front porch, caught my eye. At 3:47 a.m., 2 hours before I found the box in the vent, someone had walked up to the porch. Not Marilee, not blue sweater guy. This was someone else. Tall, hooded, no visible face. They stood there for 27 seconds. Then they looked straight at the camera, not accidentally, but deliberately, and held up a piece of paper. I paused the footage and zoomed in. The paper said, "Ellis says hello." Then the figure walked off into the night like it was a normal thing to do. I don't remember standing. I don't remember walking to the door. But suddenly I was there, staring out into the street, half expecting him to still be there. But it was quiet. Too quiet. Like the street itself was holding its breath. I sat back down, opened my laptop again, and started a list of everything I knew. Everything real. Because the longer this went on, the more I started questioning what parts of my life were actually mine, and which ones were scripted by her. Our vacations. Her weird overreaction when I suggested switching banks. The time we randomly met that couple at the cabin rental, and she insisted we delete the photos after. None of it felt random anymore. And Ellis Danton, whoever he was, wasn't just a ghost from her past. He was either still alive, or someone was pretending he was. Either way, I had already dug too deep. And now someone knew I was looking. There was a photo in that box I hadn't looked at closely the first time. It was low quality, faded like it had been through water or heat. A Polaroid, not digital like the others. It showed Marilee at a long rectangular table in what looked like a dull office space. Fluorescent lights, mismatched chairs, one of those plastic water coolers in the back corner. Nothing stood out, except the man standing behind her. Middle-aged, short graying hair, thick-rimmed glasses, sharp suit with no tie. Everyone else in the photo was smiling. He wasn't. He was staring directly at the camera, like he knew it wasn't supposed to be taken. I flipped the photo over. This time I noticed the handwritten note along the bottom edge. Q3 pre-session, CBM. No year. No names. But 3 initials. CBM. That was something. I grabbed my laptop again and ran a reverse image search on the photo. Nothing. I cropped the man's face and tried again. No hits. That didn't surprise me. Someone like him wouldn't leave traces online. People who operate behind curtains rarely do. Still, CBM kept bouncing around in my head like a code I was supposed to crack. Then I remembered something. A memory that meant nothing at the time, but now felt like a shard of glass from a broken window I'd only just noticed. 3 years ago, we went to a dinner party Marilee insisted on attending. It was hosted by an old client of hers, or so she claimed. The house was in a gated neighborhood, the kind of place with wine cellars bigger than my apartment in college. I remember being wildly underdressed and painfully out of place. Everyone there seemed to know each other in that quiet, calculating way professionals in delicate industries do. No real conversation, just observation disguised as small talk. At one point, a man approached Marilee. He didn't hug her, didn't even smile. But she stiffened when she saw him, and I never forgot that. He shook my hand, introduced himself as Calder, and said he used to work with Marilee in training. That's all. Then he disappeared into the party like smoke in a vent. I asked her about it on the way home, and she just laughed and said, "He's an odd old consultant from my early days, kind of like a cult leader in khakis. Ignore him." Back then I did. Now I couldn't. The name Calder. The initials CBM. The man in the Polaroid. It clicked like a code unlocking in my brain. This wasn't just some ex-boss or mentor. He was connected to whatever program she had been part of. The profiling, the timelines, the staged exits. And she hadn't just learned it, she had absorbed it. I dug deeper. Government archives, nonprofit records, even dark web-adjacent forums with whispers of experimental behavior modeling firms from the late 2000s. I found one. A shell organization called Cognitive Behavior Mapping Initiative, CBM Initiative, founded in 2009, disbanded in 2014. No known surviving personnel, no public records, except one blog post, buried in a forgotten WordPress page, with a title that simply read, "The Clean Exit Myth." The article was barely coherent. It read like a conspiracy theory, but then again, so did my life. It described a defunct operation where clients were taught to infiltrate and disengage from psychologically vulnerable targets for applied testing. Emotional detachment training, controlled romantic immersion, stress point data harvesting. I couldn't breathe as I read it. It sounded like a spy thriller written by someone 3 days off their meds, except that it lined up perfectly with Marilee's notebook. Near the end of the post, there was a paragraph about a man named CD, who allegedly broke protocol and continued operating independently after CBM shut down. He used new identities, relocated often, and developed a method to train others off record. He called it soft detonation, emotionally collapsing a target from the inside out, with no visible blast zone. Soft detonation. That's what this was. What she'd done to me. No screaming. No scandal. Just quiet erosion, designed so no one else would believe it had even happened. I couldn't sit still anymore. I had to find this Calder. I didn't care what it took. I dug through our old tax folders, the ones she never let me file. And there it was, a vendor receipt from 5 years ago. Calder Behavioral Management Consulting. A P.O. box in Pinebrook, just outside the city. It couldn't be coincidence. The initials, the name, the cold man at the party, it all pointed to him. I called the number listed on the receipt. No answer. I called again, blocked number this time. Still nothing. So I got in my car. The drive took a little over an hour. The P.O. box was inside a strip mall UPS store, wedged between a vape shop and a real estate office with fake smiling faces on all their posters. The guy behind the counter said Calder hadn't picked up mail in over a year. Said he used to come in on Thursdays, early, wore gloves even in summer, never made eye contact. Seemed like a guy who never left the Cold War. He added, like that explained anything. But then he hesitated. He left one package behind once, said someone might come asking. Told me to trash it if no one showed up in 6 months. I kept it anyway. Just felt weird. He reached under the counter, pulled out a small envelope. No return address. No markings. I opened it right there in front of him. Inside was a single sentence printed on a square of parchment paper. If you found this, then you've already been chosen. That's when I realized I hadn't stumbled into anything. I'd been recruited. The sentence stayed in my head long after I left the strip mall. If you found this, then you've already been chosen. It rang like a bell that had been struck a long time ago, still echoing through me. For a moment, I considered driving home, pretending this hadn't happened, chalking it all up to paranoia fueled by heartbreak and sleep deprivation. But deep down, I knew that door had been locked from the other side the second I stepped through it. There was no turning back. This wasn't about Marilee anymore. This was about me. I didn't sleep that night either. Instead, I sat at my desk with the black notebook open, reviewing every note she'd made about me. Most of it was vague at first. Dates, meal preferences, comments about my tendency to over-apologize in conversations and avoid confrontation. It was unsettling to read my own behaviors through her eyes like I was a lab rat under glass. But then I found the section labeled Loyalist, Extended Run, and that's where the real horror began. It was more detailed than the others. Pages long. Bullet points broken into emotional baselines, stress response cycles, dependency reinforcement, and something called phase drift management. I read phrases like feeds on guilt, useful for prolonging engagement, and reinforces identity through acts of service, predictable under pressure. I felt like I was reading my obituary while still alive. But the most haunting section was the one labeled Endgame Forecast. She had written it a year ago. Subject will resist collapse if a path to rescue remains. Remove one support pillar at a time. Trust, purpose, stability, shared memory. Final trigger. Public exposure to infidelity under high-conflict stimulus. Test if loyalty overrides self-worth. Optional outcome. Psychological loop or social withdrawal. Watch closely. It didn't even sound like a breakup plan. It sounded like a behavioral experiment. I wasn't her partner. I was the endpoint in some sick research. That's when something clicked. A memory I'd buried because it hadn't seemed important. 2 years ago, I got contacted by a research company after signing up for one of those personality optimization quizzes online. They asked if I'd be open to participating in a multi-year behavioral tracking program for anonymous study. They offered money. I ignored it. Never replied. I thought it was a scam. But what if it wasn't? I searched my email inbox for the company's name, Miralogic Insight Systems. Nothing came up. But when I checked my archived mail, there it was, flagged, unopened, dated March 3rd, 2 years ago. The sender address? Norapli at Cominitiative. IO. My hands went cold. I opened the message. It thanked me for my initial cognitive profile submission and mentioned a follow-up interview with a partner specialist, a woman named Marilee H. It listed a time and date, the exact date of our first date. It wasn't fate. It wasn't random. It wasn't even her idea of romance. She'd been assigned to me. My entire relationship, our meeting, our milestones, every fight, every vacation, all of it had been data collection. Fieldwork. I was the goddamn control variable in some social experiment being run by people who didn't care whether I healed or not. She wasn't the villain in a love story. She was a field agent in a simulation I never agreed to. The worst part? I loved her. Even now, knowing what I knew, I still felt that sick, buried yearning like some broken compass spinning toward a magnet it couldn't escape. That was the real experiment, wasn't it? To see how far someone like me could fall and still reach for the person who pushed them. That night, I sat in the driveway for 2 hours, staring at our house. Her car was gone, of course, but the porch light was on. It was always on when she wanted to send a message, a quiet way of saying she expected to come home, that the door would stay open. But this time, it wasn't for her. It was for me. She wanted me to spiral. She wanted me to dig until I couldn't function. The deeper I fell, the more complete her file would be. My breakdown was her final submission. But I wasn't going to give it to her. Not yet. The next morning, I packed a bag and drove 3 hours north to a town I remembered her mentioning only once. A place she claimed to have lived for a few months during a weird phase. She had said it like a joke, dismissive, but something about the way her eyes shifted when she said it stuck with me. I checked into a motel under a fake name. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I shut off my phone, bought a prepaid burner, and started tracing her past through utility records, library logins, and town office directories. Took me 3 days, but I found something. An old lease agreement. In her handwriting. For a 1-bedroom apartment attached to a detached garage in the outskirts of town. The address didn't show up on Google Maps anymore. The records said the property had been sold, then transferred privately, then deactivated. But the signature on the lease? It was hers. And beside hers was another name I'd never seen before. Cassandra Vane. Not Merrily. Not even close. A completely different identity. And in that moment, I realized the woman I married might not even exist. The house was still standing, though barely. It sat at the edge of the town like it had been forgotten by time. A crumbling wooden frame surrounded by overgrown brush, the mailbox missing, the fence sagging like an old man's spine. I parked down the road and walked the last half-mile on foot, just to be sure no one was watching. I'd come too far to ruin it now. I wasn't sure what I expected. A shrine? A war room? A blank space? What I found was something else entirely. The door wasn't locked. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and something older, like dried flowers and stale ink. Boxes were stacked in the corners, half unpacked. Walls covered in notes, timelines, scraps of old newspapers and magazine clippings. But what stopped me wasn't any of that. It was the wall covered in photos. Not strangers. Me. Dozens of them. From across the years. Me walking to work. Me tying my shoe on a park bench. Me laughing at some forgotten joke in a diner. Some were taken years before we ever met. Or before I thought we met. I stood in front of them and couldn't speak. There was no hate in the way they were displayed. They weren't mocking. They weren't cruel. They felt admiring, even reverent. Below the photos was a single sheet of paper in a glass frame. I pulled it down and read it carefully. It wasn't a note. It was a report. One paragraph, printed and signed with a symbol I didn't recognize. Subject, L. Mercer. Control Group Alpha. Emotional retention rating, 96%. Despite repeated trust breaches, subject maintained belief in mutual restoration. Subject's resilience exceeds standard parameters. Recommend early closure and subject release with compensation. Psychological damage, minimal and reversible. Conclude observation. Mark as anomaly. Anomaly, not failure. Anomaly. I let the words settle into my chest. After everything, the betrayal, the manipulation, the mind games, I wasn't broken. I wasn't their data. I was the variable they couldn't control. And then I heard her voice. Not a recording this time. Live. Behind me. Lyle. I turned slowly, not flinching. Not anymore. She looked the same, but not. Her posture was different. Shoulders relaxed, face softer. No makeup. No carefully constructed version of herself. Just whoever she really was. Cassandra, I said. Or do you even answer to that? She smiled. Not the crooked, calculated kind I'd come to fear. Just tired. Almost human. I wanted to explain, she said. I didn't expect you to come here. Not this far. I waited. No interruptions. No anger. Just silence. And the weight of truth hanging in the air. She stepped forward, slowly. The program ended 2 years ago. Officially. But I kept going. I thought, maybe this time, I could stay longer. That I could stop observing and just live. I tried. But I couldn't untangle the two versions of myself. By the time I realized I didn't want the data anymore, it was too late. You chose to destroy me, I said flatly. I chose to love you, she replied. I laughed. Not cruelly. Just hollow. You don't love someone and then write a field report on their emotional collapse. She didn't deny it. Just nodded. You're right. We stood there for a long time. No more lies. No more surveillance. Just two people who had both lost something inside themselves. I left everything here for you, she finally said. I didn't want to disappear without giving you a choice. You deserve that. And what choice is that? To decide whether you carry this, she said, pointing around the room, or leave it here with me. I looked around once more. At the files, the cameras, the photos of me laughing when I didn't know I was being watched. It all felt heavy, but also hollow now. I had answers. All of them. And suddenly, I didn't want them anymore. I think I'm done being someone's project, I said. She nodded. Good. And then I left. I didn't take anything with me. No photos. No files. I didn't call anyone or go to the press. I didn't post it to Reddit. I didn't tell the world what she did. Because it wouldn't have mattered. Some stories aren't meant for headlines. Some stories are just meant to end. It's been 6 months now. I moved to a different state. Changed jobs. I adopted a dog. A ridiculous mutt with crooked ears who refuses to follow instructions. I named him Echo, because sometimes the past still calls out. And that's okay, as long as I don't answer. I still think about her. But it doesn't hurt the same way anymore. Because I survived. And not just survived. I healed, not because someone saved me, but because I finally stopped needing to be chosen.